Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the SkyView Partners presentation today around practice value and the recent market events and how this is going to play out for the long-term legacy and succession for wealth management practices across the country. You are entering in, and so I'm just giving it one more minute here as the attendees filter in. We have a lot of people attending today, so thank you for your time and attention on what in Minnesota is a gorgeous summer afternoon. So I hope it's the same wherever you are today. Well, good. As everybody filters in, I'm going to introduce myself and introduce my co-host here. My name is Aaron Hasler. I'm a co-founder and managing partner with SkyView Partners, which is based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. Our office is in a western suburb of this beautiful state, right on the shores of Lake Minnetonka. So as you can see by my luxurious background, due to COVID and the current laws in Minnesota, I'm working from my basement. I have 4 children in various stages of life, and so I'm in the quietest spot I can find right now for the next 45 minutes. So enjoy the background of my storage closet and my ski boot selection behind you, and we'll enjoy the conversation. So SkyView Partners and myself, I have 20 years of experience in the wealth management industry, and I came together with my business partners 2.5 years ago because we knew that this industry had a continual challenge with access to capital, and we knew that in order to have a successful industry, a successful legacy for many of you as business owners, whether you're currently in acquisition mode or in succession mode, that access to capital is something that's choked our industry for years. So SkyView Partners has brought conventional bank financing to the masses, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through the presentation. But we are a wealth management team that is coming to you with a financing perspective, and we're learning banking and have developed resources for you for this industry. My co-host today is Duncan MacPherson, who many of you have heard of. Duncan is on video as well because I'm in Minnesota, he's in Canada, and I'm not allowed to go up there. So what we're going to do is co-host here through webinar, and this is a fantastic way to communicate. Duncan is owner and founder of Pareto Systems, and I'm going to allow him to introduce himself and talk a little bit about his business.
Okay, Aaron, thanks very much. Thanks for having me. And yeah, you guys are as close to Canadian as we're going to get. So
That's right.
I always look forward to working with you. And you're just happy to be able to talk to somebody who's north of you, right? Because
that's correct. That's correct.
Yeah, really looking forward to this, and for many reasons. Obviously, this bizarre last 3 or 4 months has been very disruptive. But here's what's great. I mean, there's incredible opportunities. You know the old expression, there's always a bull market somewhere. Well, we have many elite financial professionals who are actively acquiring businesses. We have others who are positioning to achieve their liquidity event and exit gradually or immediately. And basically what we've done is developed and refined a process that not only removes the mystery, but just maximizes the outcomes. And again, it's all process driven. And, you know, you think about a typical high caliber financial advisor, their technical ability is very strong around wealth management and all their core competencies. Well, Aaron, what we ask them to do is apply the same level of importance to practice management and relationship management as they do to wealth management. And the outcomes of that are incredible. So I can't wait to interact with you throughout this conversation.
Fantastic. Thanks, Duncan. And there are going to be 2 common themes as I go through this presentation. One is the importance of practice management and a business coach. I've used business coaches in various businesses over the years. I think it's a fantastic process. And the second one is the annual valuation, which I think is a fantastic resource for all of you professionals out there to continue to evaluate and assess the growth of your business and have a deeper dive and insight into what you are building. So let's jump into our presentation today, everyone. If my slides will let me here, hang on. What we're seeing today, and this has been, as Duncan mentioned, really since March, this has been one of the most fascinating periods I think any of us have lived through. Because what's been happening is we haven't seen a slowdown, other than the market correction. We have not seen a slowdown in M&A activity. Things have continued on in our industry almost at a relatively normal pace, which is in such bizarre and stark contrast to, say, my neighbor across the street who owns 4 high-end restaurants and is literally sitting around twiddling his thumbs, trying to figure out how he's going to reorganize his entire career. So I feel like we are blessed as professionals to be able to continue to work actively, be important to our clients' lives, and more importantly, continue to grow your practice and your enterprise value. So as we talk today, we're under the assumption, and I think all of you are, in an independent practice setting, meaning that you own the clients and you own the relationships. And that's what we're going to talk about. I'm going to flip back and forth as we talk through from both the perspective of the buyer and seller. This conversation is really neutral for each party, but at the end of the day, what I want is for each of you to hear really what the other side is thinking and what factors that you can take into play as you're conversing with the other side. I think one of the best strategies in the mergers and acquisitions game is to understand what the other side's perspective is and understand what their opportunities and challenges are. And that's going to make you incredibly successful depending upon your project view. So as we realize that we can continue to, even in this marketplace, have successful M&A, we're going to talk a little bit about valuations, how the pandemic and the market is going to affect valuations and deal structures. We're going to show you some examples of the deal structures that we can put together at SkyView. I'm going to talk a little bit about our bank financing basics, just so you have a rudimentary understanding. And then we have other materials and literature that you can learn more about the nuances and details of that as we go through that. And those are available on our website, skyview.com. So what I want to talk about today is the importance of the valuation. Obviously, it's the number one factor on the majority of minds, whether you're the buyer or the seller. And what we're seeing is that with today's market, which right now has been relatively neutral, this has been a benefit. We've been largely able to include the valuations that have been historic for the last 18 months or so. But we also know that should there be any significant changes to the market and to the revenue of your practice, that we can make adaptations. Because one of the things that would kill this active M&A market that we have today is a big market correction. But with creativity and innovative solutions, there are fantastic ways to continue on that pace.
You know, it's interesting, Aaron, sorry to cut
Yeah.
you off there, but you talk about adaptation. I don't know if you read any of Alvin Toffler's great books. He's a futurist, and he talked about the concept of the new illiterate. It had nothing to do with reading or writing. It had everything to do with the ability to learn, unlearn, relearn, and just ensure the clay is soft. And that's what we find as a commonality amongst these very enlightened advisors is they're not set in their ways. They're not locked in the status quo. And there's an openness to understanding the art and science of valuations and ensuring that these events are positive. And I never, just this week alone, I'll give you a little bit of context. I spoke to a team who acquired their first business in January. So we spent a year getting them franchise ready for scalable growth. They acquired their business in January, launched, and then the world changed. Well, they successfully transitioned that business and onboarded those clients all virtually through a platform like this. And the untapped opportunities and the multipliers from the acquisition have been incredible. And that's because they weren't set in their ways. I talked to another team today. They're on their 4th acquisition, and every single one is getting better, and it's becoming an intellectual property, and they're taking it so incredibly seriously. And then earlier this week, spoke to a team of ours who's now over 30 acquisitions. So
Wow.
now their growth model is just through the roof, and they're capitalizing on demography. They're capitalizing on commoditization and friction in the industry. So I'm only chiming in here because this is a real mindset to embrace both the qualitative and the quantitative elements to make this a successful outcome.
And what we've been seeing for all of you folks in the audience is that advisors have continued to use these tools that are available to have really successful transitions. So as Duncan mentions, one of the tools that I've used, 10 times a day now at SkyView is Zoom, right? I have gone from a world where I never used Zoom. I did phone calls within the office, which was much prettier than what I'm sitting in today. And now, as I go through, I have much more meaningful conversations with clients all over the country just by using Zoom and making that face-to-face connection. Everybody has a good time joking about what your office situation looks like, what your home setup is, the opportunities and challenges. So if you have not embraced a Zoom or any like platform, I encourage you to do so. It's a fantastic tool and resource. The other one that I thought was interesting, and I'm not going to remember the appropriate name of the company, but I had an advisor that had just done a successful transition of practice he bought. And what he did was he used a pre-recorded message by the seller. And so what the seller did was pre-recorded a customized message to each individual client. And then on the day that they announced their merger, that email with the client's video, which was roughly 1 to 2 minutes per client, went out, and it was a personalized explanation with the client's name that goes out into their email box. The seller was then talking through why he's making a transition, what he did and why he selected that particular buyer, and what it's going to mean for that individual client over the coming 3, 6, and 12 months. What was interesting is that many of you know when you typically do a merger like this, a seller and a buyer, for that matter, are getting on the phone and they're trying to communicate with clients almost in a 24 to 36 hour period that a change is happening. Sometimes it's because you're making a broker dealer change, or you just need paperwork to go in that's being out in the mail. So this is a super effective tool to basically cut time into a fraction of what you would normally do with those individual calls. The benefit, of course, is that you can write a message in email, your clients can watch the video, you can still follow up with phone call. And what we've seen is that in spite of this pandemic, in spite of many of you having restrictions and limitations, Minnesota has just gone back to an all-mask environment, that you can continue to communicate with clients in an exceptional way. And what we've seen is that our conversion rates, as far as clients and retention rates, are as high, if not higher, than they've ever been. It also benefits that your clients can't go out and meet with any other financial advisor. So that's certainly a perk to it.
That's such a great point. The personalized communication to make that evergreen, so nothing goes to someone's head to die. They can actually go back and review some of that messaging. It's interesting. Video can become such a powerful intellectual property. The team I spoke with today, who's on number 4 in their acquisition, they're capturing now video of their process, talking to the advisor around what it looks like to exit. And what most advisors look for, especially based on the demography, is they want liberation, they want legacy, and they want the liquidity event. So they want to be liberated knowing this is going to go well. Legacy means their clients are in good hands, and liquidity means the outcome is economically attractive. Well, we're capturing all of that to basically make the business even more franchise ready. And then in addition to creating one-to-many messaging for priming the pump with the clients who are about to transition and onboard. I'll just put in a plug here for everybody. There is a firm in Portland, Oregon. You can mention my name. It's called Idea Decanter. They have cracked the code on creating video for financial professionals on both the organic and the enterprise side. So if you don't want to reinvent that wheel, talk to Idea Decanter in Portland and just tell them that you have experienced this conversation with Pareto and SkyView.
Cool. Great recommendation. So for those of you that are in the stages of putting together a deal, we're going to talk about some of the resources for you. So ultimately what we're saying is stay the course, right? Again, right now the market is good, so we can set the price aside. But at the end of the day, there are options for you should the market make adjustments, and we're going to talk about those. So one of the major things that we can do is if you're a buyer out there and you're communicating with a seller or sellers, what I think you can look at is no seller wants to miss the high water mark, right? So if we see a major market correction, and I always joke, this is my kind of tongue-in-cheek market commentary. There are a few things that are affecting the market today. It may be for those of us in the United States, a second round of the CARES Act and additional funding. But the big thing to me is come fall, whether the NFL season gets underway or not. If the NFL season goes on as planned and players are playing games, I think the market stays stable. If the NFL season is canceled or postponed, all bets are off. Duck and cover. It could get interesting. But no, in all seriousness, as we start to creep back towards normal life, we hope that some of the solutions that are happening out there are going to continue to create a stable market, but we're also cautiously optimistic and we can make adjustments around this. So what do we do in this pandemic related period is we can create options around escrow. So let me back up a second and say that what SkyView does is we provide bank loans for financial advisors. It's a 7-year loan with a 10-year amortization schedule. So what that means is those of you that are buyers and paying for this, you have 10 years to pay off that loan on a fixed interest rate. The rate is fixed through 7 years and then adjusts to a new negotiated rate for a year 7 to 10. So what that means is our recommended deal structure is typically anywhere from 60 to 80% down payment to the seller. That's your good faith that you have the financing, you have the financial wherewithal, and you have the interest in buying their practice. Then what we do is we hold a certain portion in escrow. That's your seller look back provision. If certain clients don't follow, between the two parties, you've negotiated an adjusted price, and that's predetermined and defined in your purchase agreement. So what we've done is in the pre-pandemic, it was anywhere from 75 to 80% down payment with 20% or so, 25% in escrow. That was typically done at the 1-year anniversary. Now what we're seeing is some minor adjustments to this, which is typically the look back provision, if you will, the final determination of the price is still at 12 months. But sometimes just due to market conditions and or the length of the transition, then we hold back in escrow for a period of 2 to 3 years. Now, all of this is customizable and negotiable. Again, these are our kind of recommendations for making these deals look good for the bank and getting a high acceptance rate. But our job at SkyView is to really work with you, work with your team, and work with the available cash flow you have in the business and the available parameters to create the right structure such that it's acceptable for a bank and you can close on that practice.
Hey, Aaron, could I just ask you, are you seeing
Yeah.
any indications that sellers will also add in a provision for a kicker based on real untapped opportunities or veins of gold that are tapped into that weren't necessarily expected?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we've seen a couple of things. There's always the option for, so we do what we would call a conventional commercial loan. So for those of you that are negotiating with a seller or those of you that are thinking of selling, the old way of doing things was an SBA loan. Now there are certain advantages, many of you know right now, in an SBA loan in that it pays principal and interest for about 6 months due to the CARES Act. That ends September 27th. We may see a revision of that, and there will be information on the SkyView website as those developments happen. But at the end of the day, you can have a conventional commercial loan, which means that if you are a seller or if you're negotiating with a seller and that seller wants to stick around in the business, they can stay on as an employee or what we call a seller ambassador. And the opportunity for that seller ambassador, and this goes back to the kind of the practice management and some of the ideas that Duncan's team can put together, but you can keep that seller around. And I always think that what better referral source or center of influence is there for your business and your practice than a retired, successful financial advisor, right?
Incredible.
Um, so one of the things that I really like, especially in this type of environment we're in, is communicate with your seller, understand their interests and the dynamics and what drives them. We have a lot of talented individuals in this industry, and what I'd love to see is that more of us as seller ambassadors start to get involved in charitable endeavors. Maybe it has to do with the pandemic. Maybe it has to do with things like in Minneapolis, where there was tremendous civil unrest, and now we have significant amounts of property damage, businesses to rebuild, those types of things. But ultimately, that seller could get involved with whatever drives them, whatever interests them, and then you create a referral schedule so that seller sticks around. And as they get involved in the community, as they're a presence, you can incorporate that into your marketing plan, and then they can refer in and receive compensation for the referral business that they're sending in as a result of their work. So you can get really creative and impactful in today's marketplace. And I think it's really, really exciting thing.
If I
thing to
could
do.
run with that for just a second,
Yeah.
and I'd like to see how this lines up with your format and process. But when we're talking about a seller maximizing their outcome, and we're talking about advisors who've gone like 6x, like really meaningful with kickers.
Yeah.
It comes down to standardization of their process, the ability to demonstrate their plan execution, the retention of the clients and team members, because sometimes team members stick around. And on the advisor, to your point, we actually suggest that the advisor who's selling has to become a client of the firm and be retained as a consultant to assist with the transition of the clients and to be that COI source. And then the last of the four components are the EBITDA trajectory and those veins of gold, because as you know, when money goes into motion, you can rekindle, you can rejuvenate relationships and stop being sort of your own best kept secret for these clients that have drifted into a pattern of familiarity. Unlock and start future pacing the role of the financial professional. New business comes out of the woodwork. Again, saw that today. Does that sort of protocol line up with you guys?
And I'll say this, and one of the things that I think Duncan mentions that can be so important is for those of you who want to keep that seller around, which I recommend. I just said this to a client the other day. Buyer and seller have to have professional respect to have a successful deal. The clients understand that there's professional respect between the two parties. You don't have to agree on every topic, right? But at the end of the day, one of the valuable things for those of you that are out in the audience today is to hire a practice management coach and to talk through some of the processes that Duncan's team has, because for a seller, one of the challenges is things are going to change. Things are going to change with their practice. New processes are going to come in. Buyers going to adopt new technology. They're going to have some feelings of being set by into the background. So having a business coach and having the seller incorporated into, to the extent that you guys are able to, that process, I think is a tremendous opportunity for those of you that invest in it. But it does take the work of a professional and an outside party to really keep a collaborative relationship. It's much like a marriage. You work at it and you invest a little time in it, and it can be a really successful critical difference between, say, having a single digit growth rate post sale to having that double digit knock it out of the park growth rate that I think you can have for the next 5 to 6 years post sale, as you, the buyer, would be introduced to new clients and new opportunities.
And not to belabor that, but the credibility of the departing advisor who's going to gradually ride into the sunset is when they get to experience the new advisor's process by becoming a client. the comfort and persuasive impact they have is immense. And then, of course, being retained as a consultant means that they still get their work optional lifestyle now, but they're still relevant. That
Right.
keeps them
They feel
vibrant.
valued. Yep.
And you're right. I mean, the 6 degrees of separation and the advocacy, because the advisor's not basically saying, I'm done, I'm out. Basically saying there's nothing wrong with what I did in the past. After the due diligence I did, this advisor's better. Their client experience is more built out. My clients are in better hands. And they can represent that and articulate and socialize that because they've gone through it themselves. By
Right.
saying, I didn't just transition my business, I became a client. That's pretty powerful.
And for the sellers that are in the audience, you can go through all of Duncan's process without the hard work. You let the buyer do all the work, and you can sit down and have all the fun. So one of the things I want to talk about to do in addition to this is you have options on these conventional commercial loan structures to stay involved in the business as an owner. So if we've got a large practice and you're going to sell to internal employees over time, you can sell off in tranches, which we'll talk about in more detail. But we are seeing that there are an increasing number of partial sales. What's interesting is that, and this is, we're talking post-pandemic here, right? And what's interesting is that our average seller age is decreasing. Now, some of that's just societal, as the kind of greatest generation crew has started to age into their upper 60s and early 70s and beyond. And now what we're seeing is that people have more hobbies, have more outside interests, and they want to do other things besides just work in the business. Whatever your interests are, one of the benefits of this conventional commercial structure, and what we've been working so hard on at SkyView, is around the partial sale. And we'll talk about some of this in detail. So what I want to talk about is this conventional financing. And I'll keep in mind, I'm always in my presentations of interest in talking about predominantly conventional financing. SkyView will also do SBA financing where it's appropriate. There's a time and a place for it. Again, in this particular era, there was some advantages to having SBA loans. And so what we do is ultimately sit down with you. We identify what the needs are for the business, and we figure out a way to come up with the best solution for your particular acquisition. So one of the things that we want to talk about is this conventional financing, which does allow you, for those of you that own large practices and are going to be selling, to do an internal sale. You can still get the same price that you would on an external sale. We're just using bank financing, and we're using it in a variety of ways to bridge that gap. You can still sell externally. If you had a health event, you simply just wanted to merge based on the pandemic and somebody having a better grasp on technology, we can do an immediate sale and keep you involved. For those of you with large practices, we can schedule tranche sales. And move my slide out of the way so I can actually see my own presentation here. And then we can do what's called the sell and consult, which is a little bit of what Duncan and I have been talking about. You can do anything from sell and stay on as an employee. You can have a small portion of the business that you own. One of the key elements is if you're a seller or if you're thinking about selling, when you are a 20% owner or greater in a company, you are considered in a cash flow based business, which is what we are. There's not a hard collateral here. It is just these client relationships. So you're considered an integral part of the business if you're 20% owner or greater, which means that you would be a co-guarantor on that loan. And for those of you that are interested in this, there are a variety of solutions that I don't have time to get into today, and maybe we can break that out into a separate podcast. But what I recommend, and kind of one of the call to actions for the meeting today, is for those of you that are sellers, call SkyView, and what we'll do is put you in touch with one of our seller consultants to talk about your business vision and how commercial financing can help you realize that vision. And we can talk through the particulars of your business and of your deal structure to help you understand which one is going to be the right fit for you. Sorry, my slides have this fade effect. I keep thinking I'm going to get one slide and then they keep going.
If I could just jump ahead a little bit on
Go
this
ahead.
sale. I've got to tell you something that I see developing as a pattern is I'm seeing advisors who've got 200, 250 clients, and we're telling them based on 80/20 to grow down
Mm.
to about 50 clients and elevate the client experience to those 20% who generate 80% of the business. Start going up market and replicating and competitor proofing them. Restore some liberation and order to your life, and transition the 80%, those 150, 200 clients, to somebody else. There's a vein of gold in both addressable audiences, and I see that becoming a pattern more in the coming years.
I totally agree. And this brings up a whole topic of conversation and attention that we could go on to. But for those of you that are sellers, you can really start to envision what your business would look like, consult with the Pareto team, and understand how you can maximize the growth in your business pre-sale and post-sale. And then identify the team around you and say, is this the right team? Is this who I want to sell to? Or do I want to sell to an outside party? And hiring professional consultants like this really makes a difference. I always joke with my wife that I think best when I talk out loud. So she's the victim of that scenario. But I really have a big belief in professional consultants, because that's exactly what you're doing. You're talking to the therapist, you're talking through your ideas and your concepts. You have somebody that's going to give you additional ideas or pushback. And then what we can do is then help you understand, based on your vision, how these work, right? So that's where we can look at these things. The tranche sale is really something that ultimately is a fantastic tool for a variety of you that want to continue to grow and want to do what Duncan's talking about, which is concentrate down into, say, that 50 core clients. Because what you can do is now start to incentivize your next generation advisor with pushing clients over to them, having them step up to the plate. But then you can ultimately either sell off to them in a small tranche and allow you to monetize some of the business and focus on your top end growth. But then you're continuing to stay and have an impact on the business and on the enterprise value. So you're continuing to work, you're thinking smart, you're thinking effective, and you're really probably seeing some of your best growth years by doing a transaction like that. One of the benefits to it, I think, is really being able to engage that next generation. And at SkyView, and this is where, again, an outside consultant really is going to help you guys. But one of the things that you really need to understand is what drives that next generation behind you, and start to engage them into the idea and the thought of what's the potential for them, what's the ownership structure, how would they engage into the business? Because one of the biggest challenges for sellers today is to understand, as I'm a 67-year-old advisor, what's in the head of that 41-year-old or that 36-year-old. And there are generational differences just based on how we all grew up that really can separate or cause rifts within these conversations. And so it's so important to create a vision, communicate it with your team, especially if you're in your, let's say, 50s or early 60s. Hey, how do I grow this business and double its value over the next 5 to 10 years before I fully sell? And how do I engage my team? And then ultimately, what am I looking for in my team to ensure that they're the right people to sell the business to? And all of that, in my opinion, requires practice management and vision so that you guys can understand what you're best at, what your team is best at. And that's going to help you a lot in the sale.
Aaron, you talk about unmet needs. The advisors who address their own continuity and succession issues make themselves more indispensable to their clients who have developing continuity, succession, and family investment legacy issues. So you think about the classic ideal client of a financial advisor is the millionaire next door, first generation self-made wealth. And they don't generally always plan really well about their own succession.
Right.
You want to read a great book on that. It's called Beer Money. Unintended.
Spoken like a true Canadian here.
Yeah, well, of course. There might be a hockey analogy in there too, but Beer Money, you know, when it comes to intergeneration, like money in motion, and from that respect, there's examples and warnings, and we can learn from both. But I'll tell you, the financial advisors that engage the protege and position them as part of the process, that is a phenomenal footing for everything we're talking around enterprise value and these types of transactions. And I'll get more into that later on. I'll let you keep going here.
Good. I love it. And as you and the audience can probably understand, Duncan and I both like to talk. We have a lot of ideas and things that we want to share. It is 37 minutes past the hour. We said we were going to keep this to about 45 minutes past the hour. So we're going to do our best here to do that. I'm going to skim through some slides. And I think what we're going to have to do is make this a series, and we can come back to you guys with additional content. So here's what I'll just quickly summarize through a few slides, is that SkyView is designed to be your representative through the commercial financing process. So we have education materials on our site for buyer preparedness and seller preparedness, for that matter, and how to do that. One of the things that we have on that site is a buyer toolkit, and so we have a link to a sister website that we have called the Advisory Practice Board of Exchange, or apboe.com. And on there, you're allowed to get your purchasing power score, which identifies what the free cash flow is within your business, how much of a business you could afford to buy, and then it provides you with some tools and materials on how to go about buying a practice. So I encourage you to check that out. There are links on our website, and we can distribute that to those that are in the audience via email afterwards. But that will show aspects of what goes into evaluation, how to assess and communicate with sellers, and just some of the tools and tricks that we've learned through the industry. One of the things I do want to talk about today is, and I think Duncan's going to have a lot to say on this too, is what drives your valuation. I'm going to say, first and foremost, if you have not had your business valued in 2020, whatever year it is, get that done today. There are fantastic resources. There are links on our website. I'm sure Duncan has some opinions about this as well. Getting an annual valuation is one of the best insights into your own practice. And it's for planning and practice management that you would engage with him. I think it's just a great tool if you're a buyer to understand what a seller's practice is worth and what you want to be buying into. And for those of you that think you might sell, having that year-over-year track record is fantastic, because what's so important to me in terms of valuation is the demographics. It is the recurring revenue. It is the, here's generation one, which I founded my business on, but I also have connections with generation two, and talking about that service model. And these are the things that are near and dear to his heart. And so I'm going to stop and let him chime in. But these things make a tremendous impact in your valuation, and things that need to be considered for both buyers and sellers as you're planning these acquisitions and successions.
Right. So I look at any business as being built to be sold. That's the mindset. Begin with the end in mind. And how do you drive enterprise value beyond the sort of the minimum requirements? I look at it as a bricks and mortar analogy. You're a fee for service professional. There are fundamentals that drive valuation, but then there are proprietary intellectual properties, your process, both in terms of the client experience and how you put all the pieces of the financial puzzle together. That's IP. That gives you professional contrast. Now, of course, you've all heard that there's more buyers than sellers. Well, again, that's just an opportunity to differentiate yourself. There are incredible ways. So individual pieces of your business get cemented by the mortar of your process. Getting all of that out of your head, standardizing and optimizing that in a procedures manual, right? A playbook based on the rule of three. Anything you do 3 or more times, it has 3 or more steps, it must be documented. When you can demonstrate as a proof of concept that you've deployed that in your business, and then that can be handed like a torch to somebody else, your enterprise value goes up. Your scalable growth, your ability to replicate and take the first and second and third acquisitions and start doing more of them. I mean, with the client I talked to today, he's on number 4. I said, literally, you are positioning yourself to be at 44 within 18 months. This thing could be humming like a Swiss watch. You could be on a beach in Cabo and this thing's just humming along if you standardize everything. Think bricks and mortar as a symbol of your business. So you've got great people, you have a great practice, you have a great process. You can decommoditize and amp up enterprise value by focusing on those things that are proprietary to you. And I've got resources on that too, Aaron.
Love it. We could probably talk about that for hours. So
Yeah.
It's exciting to do and talk about, and we encourage. Maybe we'll schedule a next podcast to even talk more in depth on that. So sellers in discussion with a potential buyer, continue the discussion. I can't stress this enough. I think one of the things that is so important for any of you that are sellers, even if you haven't started a discussion, is start it. Because at the end of the day, when we see market corrections, we see turmoil, we see scared clients, one of the best defenses that you have in that process, in my opinion, is that continuity plan and understanding what's going to happen and having the additional resources. So I think if you haven't had it, now's the time to do it. As we found is that you can be super effective with Zoom meetings. If you haven't tried a Zoom meeting, going out and identifying buyers or sellers via Zoom meetings, you can reach out through your FPA chapter. You can reach out through any industry organizations, your broker dealer, what have you. If you're an interested seller and you have no resources as far as a buyer in mind, reach out to SkyView, and then we will start to put you in touch with some of our pre-qualified buyers and talk through that conversation. But I can't stress enough, which is continue the discussions now. And one of the things that we can always do is, should there be a market correction, we can identify what your high water mark is, and we can revise the deal structure to incorporate the available cash flow, which allows that buyer to pay down the debt, but then that post-sale opportunity to regain that high water mark as the market recovers, which we know it always does. And so there are ways to protect your price, but it requires you to go out and identify that buyer and start to have these conversations. Let's see, I'm going to skip through a few slides here and talk through, let's see if I want to talk through this. We're going to skip through some of the basics here because at the end of the day, I think we've kind of made our point, and I'm at my 3:45 mark here. What I want to reiterate is that in this time, I think it's of utmost importance to go out there and have conversations. If you're a buyer, I think it's a tremendous opportunity to start to engage in a wide network of prospective sellers. Have these Zoom meetings, have these regular conversations, and start to build that opportunity. Work with the professionals that are out there in the industry. It's ourselves, Pareto Systems, to make those connections and figure out ways to do that. In the meantime, I think for those of you that, like me, no longer have a 30-minute commute, you have extra time in your day to do some of these practice management exercises and invest in the business. So I think we have some really interesting opportunities right now during this pandemic to grow our businesses, and that's what we're doing at SkyView. We're continuing to grow. We're having record months, and it's really been a very interesting time to do that. All right. So what actions can I do now? Again, as I talked about in this quieter period, we have talked about the resources on the SkyView site, which is we've got articles and links that are interesting. We have resources and links to our AppBo site. We have examples of deal structures for those of you that are buyers, and for sellers, we have a buyer identification and a seller identification tool. And then we're always available through our consultants to talk through the basics of the bank financing. I have a number of webinars just on the specifics and nuances of commercial financing that you can go back and view, and we'll keep you updated on those and the changes as those come about. Duncan, any last things that you want to talk about that kind of wrap up what your passions are as far as this time period and what's interesting for you?
I would, first of all, just subscribe to the advice of Confucius, who said it so well so long ago, to dig your well before you're thirsty. If you're a buyer or you're a seller, start now, prime that pump. Okay. So if you're thinking about becoming franchise ready and growing through scale instead of just organically, what I'd ask you to do is look for me on LinkedIn. I'm very well connected with a number of the people on the bench at SkyView. I can steer you to many resources to help you really think this through. And then if you're a seller, joining me on LinkedIn as well, just look for me, Duncan MacPherson. I'll send you a link to a video called 7 Pillars, 1 Process. It's how you can reframe relationships with your clients and create predisposition for any transitional event in the future that will support what Aaron's been talking about here. So those are ironclad, just add water resources I can provide, whether you're looking to acquire or exit. And I look forward to going deeper with you and the team, Aaron, because you've really figured this out. You've cracked the code. You've got some great people back there. And I hope we can build out these resources going forward.
Fantastic. And I had a few questions here coming in, so I'm going to try and answer these real quick and then we'll wrap up. One of them was, how do we access Duncan? So he just described that. If you can't find Duncan, you need to take a class on how to use Google, because he is everywhere and he is a very easy man to find. But Duncan MacPherson, Pareto Systems, Pareto, Pareto Systems. While he is in Canada and our brother to the north, he has majority of his clients, I think, are probably U.S. based. Is that correct?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So he loves it and comes down here. Well, used to come down here frequently. I'm not sure you're allowed into the U.S. right now or not.
I think it's just around the corner, but just FYI, yeah, big hockey fan, very proud Canadian, but I'm the most American Canadian you'll ever find. And America is batting 1,000, capitalism's batting 1,000.
Sure.
I am very optimistic about the future here.
We are too. We're excited about what's in store. What we're finding here at SkyView, to wrap it up, is banks continue to be very interested in our vertical. Why? We are a new and exciting vertical for them to lend to. So it's a new audience in a competitive commercial financing game. We're working and we're growing. I have a client, I did a loan for him in February. And from the time the new year started and then the market disruption, by April, he'd picked up 100 million in new assets. And this is an advisor that had 250 million to start with, because he got out there in front of these conversations during this time. And he was on the phone constantly with clients through the weekends, made a ton of connections. So what an amazing time for us to be able to grow in one of the strangest environments I think any of us have ever lived through. And so what we're doing at SkyView is, our mission is to provide 100% bank financing for you guys for that practice acquisition or that internal succession. We will walk you through that process. We serve as your agent and guide you through to protect your business and your legacy. And we look forward to working with you. So thanks everyone so much for your time. We appreciate it. We're sorry we couldn't have more time with you and talk about some of these other ideas. Look forward to more events, and have a great week, everyone.
Likewise.